Hello everyone, so we are again into our one of the important videos, which is concerning the weekly test series that we have started on Telegram for public administration mains. All of you know this test series would continue. It is, you can say, it is like a weekly practice program based on the mains exclusive pattern, which I call as, or we call as a team, Thinking Minds program, right, or Thinking Minds approach. So it is going to revise the entire syllabus of public administration in a very organized manner. Fine, a kind of well developed, well thought of structure and arrangement of questions is there, and every Sunday we will be putting a weekly, practice test, 10 questions, and they will be discussed then again on the subsequent Sunday. Fine. So that is the brief review of the program. So today we will be dealing with the first test that we had given. Okay, the first set of questions, 10 questions were there, mostly related to Unit 1, Paper 1, right? So it will go according to the sequence, according to the logic of the syllabus and the way it is asked in the examination. Fine. So let us start with the, you can access the question paper on the Telegram. Anybody who is watching, who is not in the group, right? And videos can be accessed on our YouTube channel. Fine. So let us talk now. When you think of public administration, basically Unit 1, you know that Unit 1 is more of a conceptual part. It is the basis, right? It is the base of the entire understanding of the theories and the concepts in public administration, right? So we are starting from, let's say, question 1. The question 1 talks about Wilson designed the identity card for the discipline of public administration. Comment, right? Now we'll talk about a separate session on this while we are continuing with this specific program for the main students of 2020. What do we mean by comment? What do we mean by elucidate? What do we mean by explain? What do we mean by evaluate? What do we mean by critically analyze, critically evaluate, analyze, okay, comment, and all those things. So we will be talking about it over the time, right? Most of these questions are based on comment or analyze, fine, or discuss. So there are various aspects in this question. Okay, so separately we'll deal with that, and but right now our focus is to discuss the question. Now all of you might have obviously attempted these questions, so let us see how you have fared. Okay, it is more of self-assessment, right? So Wilson designed the identity card. Now when we talk about this question, okay, so obviously we have to think about Wilson, right? Now Wilson as the father of public administration. You'll say I'm using the board, so this is the first question we talk about, fine, and your mains exclusive. So then basically the thinking minds program. Okay, this for basically for public administration. So let us say first question we'll talk about Wilson. So Wilson was the father of public administration. All of you know he is considered to be the father of public administration, though there is a controversy regarding that also, right? It is debatable. So von Steen is considered as the European, the continental father of public administration, whereas Wilson is more of the American father of public administration, right? So there can be conflict between these two fathers, okay, but we are not concerned with that here. The identity card of the discipline means here that Wilson was definitely one of the first person to emphatically talk about the public administration as a separate discipline. Okay. So now you start your answer with that idea that Wilson had contributed to the emergence of public administration as a discipline in the American public administration, or in the domain of the American academic study of public administration, right? And no doubt, okay, there were other people also who have contributed, right? Whether we talk about Saint Simon, right? Whether we talk about Cordelia in the traditional sense, or whether we talk about von Steen, whether we talk about some other contributors, Cameralists in France and Germany. But see, that should not be the part of the question. We can debate it over the time, but that will not come here in the answer. Fine, but you know the context, that this is the context. So you can start off that, okay, yeah, Wilson, what were the specific conditions or circumstances under which the Wilson emerges as one of the torchbearers of the study of public administration? Right. What was the need? What were the circumstances? What were the conditions, the political, social and administrative conditions, the failures of the government machinery, and why? This laid the context for the identification of a separate discipline called public administration, right? So Wilson's idea will come very strongly here that as a politician or as an academician both, who later became the president also, and he had a very strong contribution in the First World War, might be knowing that, right? So he became the president, and so he was a practitioner also, and he was an academician also, right? That also gives him a lot of credibility, okay? But you can say, so Wilson started his idea that every detailed and systematic execution of law is the field of public administration, right? It is getting harder to run the government, okay, than to make one, or it is getting harder to run a constitution than to make one. So he was basically guided by these ideas, right? And at the same time, he understood the dangers that public administration faces, right, in terms of the democracy, in terms of the influence of democracy, and probably the political and social elements that are, influencing the democracy in general, its process and its operation. So from here you start this idea. Write a small paragraph, brief paragraph regarding that whether Wilson is credited with the idea of public administration, and what were the Wilson's circumstances which led Wilson to think of this separate discipline of public administration, spoil system, corruption, rampant corruption. Like if you have read Nicholas Henry, then Nicholas Henry also highlights that what were the conditions that necessitated the need for separation of public and public administration and politics, right? So start from here and then bring this context, these circumstances, discuss them briefly, and then come on to the idea of the dichotomy. The very important aspect here is to write certain statements given by Wilson, because they will emphasize upon his views, and probably his credibility will be established more, that yes, he was the person who probably thought of creating a benchmark of the study for public administration, right? But all said and done, he was mostly related to the identity card only. Probably he did not create the residence, he did not create the office, he did not talk about the structure, he did not establish the institution of public administration, right? That is the biggest drawback of Wilson, that Wilson was more of a visionary, he was more of theoretical or laid the theoretical foundation, but he never talked about, conceptually and probably functionally, that how we'll actually separate it and what we'll actually do there when we separate it, what we'll study, fine? So these aspects were missing from the Wilson's perception. So now we can discuss this part, let's say in your third paragraph, where you will say that, Wilson's contributions were considered elementary later. His idea of dichotomy was discarded. His understanding of the relationship of politics and administration was very narrow. In fact, the discipline of public administration evolved further by its collaboration with political science or politics rather than getting away from the political science. Okay, this is very much proven when you talk about new public administration, when you talk about public policy approach. Even though there are certain gray areas in those aspects also. But even when we talk about these developments later, right, or behavioralism, when we talk about Simon, people like Simon, right, people like Waldo, right, Easton, David Easton, political system model. So all of them have somewhere reinforced the idea that Wilson's contribution was very elementary, and he did not, in the sense of a broader role of public administration in the society, he could not visualize that role. In fact, he himself, in spite of being a politician, he himself was not much, he was not able to understand much the domain of the politics, administration and society interface, right? So answer would start from the context. It will talk about Wilson's idea, his contribution, his role, his dominant views, he being a theorist and a reformer and a visionary, but not necessarily a constructive contribution in terms of any, concrete theoretical understanding, any concrete functional understanding, any concrete institutional development, right? As an organization, he does not conceive it, what will be done, how it will be established, what will be the structure, what are the problems. Okay, he mostly understands it from the legal perspective that law has been made and law has to be implemented. Fine, but as we see today, the definition of law has changed. Okay, the emergence of administrative law has taken place. So you can put all these aspects. Also, you can bring practical examples even from the American society. Later, when you see after 1960s emergence of NPA, so Wilson's credibility as father was also questioned. In fact, Goodenough was considered to be more dominant, more influential than Wilson. Okay, some people have also talked about, Waldo to be credited with this title. Okay, and likewise, so there are people who have debated it, fine, and they do not consider Wilson as the one who is creating a niche of public administration, but his contribution cannot be denied, right? So you can start the question, think of these points, and then address. Fine. Finally, when you are trying to end a question, obviously either you agree with what has been said or you disagree with this, or you take more of a middle path. That is much better. So you can always say that yes, Wilson may not be the only person, but Wilson is one of the important dominant contributors to the emergence of public administration as a discipline, and his idea of politics administration dichotomy, however implied it was, he never talked about it. Okay, still it has huge influence on public administration. Now this will be a very basic answer. Fine. Current perspectives can be added, like today when we talk about a lot of interface between politics and administration taking place. Fine, but still problems of politicization persist, corruption still persists, administration politic conflicts are still emerging. Okay, politicization is very rampant, whether it is in India, whether it is in European countries or in America. So you can bring all these examples also, okay, of what we call the facts and the data and the case studies, right? Attrition rate in the civil services in India is 25%, mid-level. So you can bring all these perspectives and also bring a practical understanding to say that, okay, no, fine, the idea of public administration has changed a lot, but his contribution is still, in certain aspects, it is visible in bits and pieces at various places, fine, and as a concept, whatever he talked about, okay, they are still quite relevant in understanding the public administration and its role in the society. So end on a positive note, that is much better. Right? Now, let us think of the second question. Okay, question 2. Calling Taylor a machinist, actually mechanist is written, but that is also used. This is actually the statement. Okay, is too harsh a criticism? Comment. Now the question specifically focuses on that should we call Taylor a mechanist, should we call Taylor a machinist, should we call Taylor more of a robotic, automated theoretician or theorist who talks about the ideas in a very predefined, in a very structured, in a very mundane, in a very, mechanical manner, right? Now to understand this, we have to take a broader understanding. We cannot take sides, right? We should not go do that way. So obviously Taylor's fundamental contribution has been to the Industrial Revolution, right? In fact, Taylor can be considered comparable to Woodrow Wilson, right? As the Wilson laid the foundation for the administrative theory, administrative study. It was Frederick Taylor who laid the foundation for the industrial management. Okay, along with, obviously there were other people also. Okay, James Watt, Halsey, Henry Town, and there were so many other people, right? And Louis Brady's, who coined the term scientific management, and there were so many people who can be associated with that. But yes, Taylor gives a practical application to this idea, to this knowledge of running the industrial organization, and that is why Peter Drucker has called Taylor as the first knowledge manager, the person who can put the knowledge to use, right? Using scientific knowledge not only to understand or have an academic intellectual satisfaction of creating a science and experimentally viewing it in a laboratory, and then developing some data and statistics. That is what not what Taylor did. He no doubt used this idea, but he applied this in the practical field of industrial management. Right. But yeah, Taylor has contributed in certain aspects dominantly, right? In terms of piece rate system, in terms of workers management, in terms of you can say classification of workers and the work, scientific understanding of the relationship between the work and the worker. For example, people are, let's say you hire somebody and he does not know what is to be done. Why he does not know? Because the industrial management has not classified the task that he has to be done, right? And sometimes the task is so voluminous that one person cannot do it. So you have to discretely divide the task, specialize or find out the specialized people for that, or train them for that, and then associate with them. This is what Taylor did. Right. So it is a very basic way of distributing work amongst people who are capable, or making them capable enough to do a particular aspect of work. Right. So which makes it very interesting and probably more motivating for people, because they know what to do, so they can contribute it better. Over the time they can specialize in the domain. Today we talk about domain competency. Second ARC uses this logic. Today we talk about specialists versus generalists. So specialists are those people which probably Taylor would have supported, right, in any organization. So paying people according to their contribution, right, system of bonus, system of rewards, system of incentives, right, all is Taylor's contribution. So we cannot deny that, right? And he also gives a philosophical change to the understanding of how the industries must work. Like he focuses on science rather than rule of thumb, right? He focuses on harmony. He talks about mental revolution, right? So he talks about rewarding people as per their effort. Right? He also talks about the understanding of soldering, so systemic soldering and natural soldering that Taylor talks about. Right? So he had understanding of human nature. He had understanding of human behavior. But yes, we can say he was purely concerned with the role of the human being, or human being as a factor of production in the industrial organization. Now, the very important aspect would be to understand that Taylor was a product of industrial revolution. In fact, Taylor hastened the process of industrial revolution, productivity, and that is a yeoman service to the society. You cannot rule that out, that it is a major contribution to the emergence of the capitalist mode of production in America, and also you can say fulfilling the needs of the mass needs of the society in a particular span of time, right? Because the needs were increasing. The industrialization had created a need for a prosperous society. The prosperous society demanded goods and services. Right? People would have come in conflict with each other if the services were not available. The prices, the mass production takes place, the price reduces, the supply increases. More or less, you get a lot of employment is created, labor intensive stuff, right? Even though automation was initiated. So all this said and done, no doubt. So this can build up your basis for the Taylor's idea. That Taylor was a scientific explorer. He was an industrial thinker. He was concerned with the productivity, and he was more concerned with mass production, assembly line production, and he wanted to give fair wages to the workers. He wanted to define what is a fair day's work, and then associate a incentive with that. Right. So all said and done, Taylor improved certain techniques. He influenced many people. Okay, whether it is Gantt, okay, whether it is the wife and husband, okay, the Gilbreths, right? Whether it is Henderson, who uses his model in various schools, academic institutions, and likewise, the influence of Taylor still holds new public management, new Taylorism. Find e-governance, use of technology. Okay, today you are talking about the big data analysis and classification of jobs, civil services. You want to go for specialization, specialist, and domain competency. All Taylor's idea in some form or the other today also quite visible. So you cannot totally deny that he was a machinist. But yes, we can go, once you build up this, obviously you cannot write all this. right? So put that into points. Start with the idea that yes, what were the circumstances of Taylor, right? And how the Taylor comes with his idea, what were his propositions, and how they revolutionized the industrial society, right? So you can understand this way also that yes, Taylor's role and contribution was the essence of the industrial revolution in US, and in fact duly accepted by the communist countries also, right? So this can be put in the beginning, and then you can talk about the criticism now. Okay, so this basically gives the content of your answer, that it was a too harsh a criticism, that he did not know about human being, he did not know about the behavioral aspect, because soldering can be given as an example. Fine. He wanted to train people and not exploit them. Fine. He wanted to reward them as per the needs or the efforts they put in. Fine. He wanted to create corps of people, well-trained people. Okay, the managers, okay, they will have responsibility, moral as well as technical responsibility towards workers. So there were a lot of things you can say which Taylor's contribution is. Fine, but all said and done, yes, Taylor, when we compare Taylor to Mayo, when we compare Taylor to later behavioralists, obviously Taylor's conception seems to be too crude, like the Robert Dahl statement, fine, that scientific management is a primitive tool of industrial polyarchy. Now this is the Robert Dahl statement. Fine. Professor Robert Hoxie, who conducted the study investigation against Taylor, fine, the House of Representatives, the committee, fine, a Congress committee was also formed. The House of Representatives also, went after Taylor, and his criticisms done by the communists alleged the Taylor to be a conspiracy theorist, trying to eliminate any aspect of communism or socialism in US. Okay, so ideologically he was pro-capitalist in nature. Fine. His mental idea of mental revolution was a kind of exploitation of workers, because he wanted to pacify the workers with the essence of money and rewards and nothing else. So no doubt he as a scholar, as an academician, he has failed to understand the social, psychological, emotional needs of the workers. But the logic is that, will the industrial management or will the industrial organizations be capable of providing all this? That is the question which still remains. Right? The lockdown is the perfect example when people have laid off, big companies have laid off, okay, a lot of employees. So do you think it is a more of mechanical exercise? Do you think it is more non-emotional exercise on their part? So even today's industries which talk about human resource management, which talk about a greater bonding between employees and the organization, okay, which talk about emotional intelligence, emotional relationship between this. Okay, theory Z, given by William Auchi, actually talks about this idea. McGregor's theory Y talks about this idea, right? And even Peter Drucker, if you read. So they all talk about these things, but the logic is that when you see today the economic crisis, 2008 recession, when you see the pigs crisis, when you see the Brexit, when you see the European Economic Community crisis, when you talk about in India also, okay, the slowdown takes place, right? Unemployment increases, or when you talk about this COVID crisis. So wherever you see, okay, that kind of emotional association, that kind of emotional contribution has virtually no meaning for the productivity and efficiency, okay, in terms of such situations, in crisis situations, right? So we can still defend Taylor and say that, yeah, it was the circumstances, it was the particular context in which Taylor comes, and his ideas were more concerned with industrial management. He was not concerned with the human aspect, because he was not dealing with, he was not a psychologist, he was not an anthropologist, he was not a sociologist who was dealing with the human behavior and human nature, right? So we can end on that note and still support Taylor, while adding that, yes, when we view Taylor in today's lens of later behavioralist, fine, with the filter of the humane filter, right? And then definitely he seems to be a little mechanical compared to others. But definitely his ideas are not outrageous, his ideas are not exploitative in that sense, and he is not at all non-humanist or inhuman in his approach. That cannot be accepted. Right? So your comments or your conclusions should be based on a well-read, well-understood logic rather than simply criticizing it. Fine. So we can just do it this way. This statement may be available in the next later question papers or later tests or later weekly, tasks. So we'll discuss about that also. Right. Question 3. The concept of rationality and efficiency are intertwined in the bureaucratic analysis of Max Weber. Right. So the notion of concept of rationality and efficiency are intertwined. Now when we talk about rationality, we have to say this question basically talks about that what Weber perceived as an organization, what Weber developed as a theory was also quite rational, was based on logic and positivism, and what Weber created, the system, fine. So its impact, the impact of the system, the consequence of the system, okay, was equally efficient. So the question basically tends to link both this. First you have to understand the logic of the question, right? So rationality and efficiency are intertwined means Weber believed that if we develop a rational theory, a theory on empirical knowledge, a theory on positive sciences, okay, based on positive knowledge, then we are going to definitely create an organization also which will be equally rational and scientific, and the consequence of such an organization would be equally efficient. So he basically linked that the more rational we are, the more efficient we become, right? And to prove his logic, obviously he talks about, you must have read about it, so kindly start from there, that what was the Taylor's idea basically. Okay, Taylor was a sociologist, a German sociologist, so kindly start from here, right? And what were the methodologies used by Taylor? So Taylor's methodology was basically, he was a classical, no doubt. His methodology was basically empirical, fine, based on positive sciences. Right? And he also develops the ideal or contributes to the ideal type approach. His categories of authority system that he develops, right? And so rationality was one very dominant factor of Weber, and rationality, according to him, fine, the word rational that he talks about, he is not basically defining rationality anywhere, but rationality, as according to him, was that there must be a very clear cut, right, and a very strong relationship between the means and the ends, and this must be defined in such a precise, in such a rational manner that the best means will automatically lead to best ends. Now this is what question is, right? So he identifies, now you might have written bureaucracy is good, bureaucracy is efficient, I know, students are writing that only. Logic is the logic that rationality and how the rationality improves on the loss, right? So how rationality would improve for this traces different authority systems, right? Starting from traditional authority system, charismatic authority system, to the legal rational system. So industrial societies, okay, and the legal rational systems. Are you getting this point? So industrial society becoming more legal rational. So from non-legal rational, from more traditional cultural, okay, to emotional to legal rational. Now this is what? This is the transition from non-rational or emotional or socio-cultural or traditional system to this. Right? So now it is fine. Have you understood the logic? Right. Okay. So the ideal type system. So here now you have to talk about this idea that how as the societies evolved, the level of rationality changes. And what is the level of rationality? Basically, it is our the way we function, the way we think, the logic and reason that we use, and how this society is also going to transform as per the evolution of whether it is the economic system, whether it is the political system. But Weber's thesis was mainly that it is the economic system, okay, which is basically shaping the society in a particular manner. So the demand for a particular kind of organization that we call as administration, demand for the state administrative systems are basically triggered by the changes in the socio-economic conditions, right? That is what Weber's logic is. So kindly link that how the traditional, the charismatic and the legal rational systems evolve, or what is his idea, right? And how, as this evolution takes place, the level of rationality increases. As the level of rationality increases, the productivity increases. So in his notion, right, of bureaucracy or bureaucratic analysis, it is quite evident that the rationality triggers the productivity. Rationality itself is a consequence of certain social and economic changes, and they demand a specific type of system. So that bureaucracy is what? Bureaucracy is the product, right, is the need of industrial societies, which even Weber did not know what will be its evolution, but yes, he visualizes that this will be the ideal system. An ideal system here would mean that as the society evolves to probably its most developed phase, still the bureaucratic system would be beneficial to the society. Okay, that is the idea of ideal type approach. Fine. So you can talk about it now. You can give, you can pep up the question or pep up the answer to make it more suitable to the question by giving your examples that how the bureaucracy as a system functions better than the monarchy or the charismatic system. Though democracies, obviously most of the democracies have a mix of all these systems, developing democracies like India or developed democracies like US, right, we still find those elements there. There are traditional elements still available, charismatic elements dominate. Okay, बाबा जी हैं, बहुत सारे बाबा जेल में हैं, but वो बाबास भी बहुत influential हैं, and they create a huge persona and aura behind them. So see, charisma also works. The traditional systems, khap panchayats are also there, and now the modern management systems or the modern industrial administrative systems, like we have a well-defined bureaucracy, a Supreme Court, a judiciary, IPC, CRPC, legal systems, and all that also are existing, coexisting. And definitely the contribution of the later one, the legal rational, is more dominant on the society, and it is more legitimate in terms of acceptance. Fine, but we cannot deny that the legitimacy of tradition culture does not exist. Fine, but yes, the process is more of evolution from non-rational, traditional to rational and bureaucratic administrative system, depending upon the economic and socio-economic changes in a society. Right. So kindly do use this. Right. But you can say that yes, there are deviations in the bureaucratic. This is how you can end the answer. Deviations in the bureaucratic system. Fine. Deviations from the rationality. Neutrality is no more a value. Politicization is very high. Corruption is very high. Irrespective of what structure you design, that structure fail or it is failing. In fact, bureaucracy by 1960s and 70s, the moment we come, right, whether we talk about the changes like neoliberal movement, okay, or we talk about the Reagan era, the Thatcherism, the new public management system that comes, later new public service that comes, right, the good governance agenda that comes, all of them, they deny the role of bureaucracy. Okay, in fact, Warren Bennis, Alvin Toffler, right, and then Frederick, okay, who talks about, Warren Bennis talks about the temporary work systems, Thayer talks about the structured non-hierarchy, okay, Toffler talks about the adhocracy, then we have people who talk about community models, okay, Blacksburg Manifesto comes 1982, it has all criticized the bureaucracy. So what Weber visualized the bureaucracy to be rational and efficient, okay, not necessarily emerged as that system. It was also dehumanized, it was also mechanical, it was also criticized for incompetency, and that is true. Right? Psychological, pathological changes impacts on the people who are part of the system. right? So this way you can now counter it also, that yes, the bureaucracy does not fully correspond to what Weber visualized, fine, the monocratic rational form of bureaucracy that he thinks or that he visualized, fine, it was non-ecological, it was more contextual to that time, and it was not at all self-evolving in nature, it was not adaptive in nature. Like Michael Crozier gives the statement that bureaucracy does not have the capability of learning. Fine, it cannot learn from its errors, it cannot rectify itself, it is a closed system, finer, closed system circularity. So people who are criticizing it. Fine, so this is how you can end your answer and put it this way, right? Question 4, what is positivism in relation to the discipline of public administration? This is a very cliche question, stereotypical, but it is tough. Did it help solve the identity crisis or has compounded the problem? So it is quite obvious that positivism is a tool of philosophy, right? It is a philosophical framework to understand things in terms of science and facts. That is what positivism is. So positive sciences mostly originated in the Western societies. Positive sciences believe that whatever is amenable to our sensory perception, that we can see, that we can touch, that we can feel, fine, that we can smell, okay, that we can physically see, visualize it, right? All that is a fact. And if any knowledge is developed on these facts, then it is going to be a science. That is a positive science, right? Though positive science tends to be reductionist in nature, that means the positive science ignores there are so many other factors. That is why it is reductionist in nature. Fine, ignoring various other factors which may not seem to be visible, which may not be felt, which may not be seen, which cannot be measured, which cannot be quantified, but still they exist. Right? So even if you say ghost does not exist, the fear of ghost exists. So technically it exists. Right? Even if you say I have not seen the God, but it exists. When you think of all this crisis that is happening, when you think of virus, you have not created. Okay, you mutated it, you manipulated, but you are not the one who created. Fine. So it has been in nature for billions of years. Right? So there are certain things, metaphysical aspects that you cannot question. So positivism fails to address those things. But yes, the entire idea of science, logic and reasoning comes from the positivism, the philosophy. Okay, the epistemology, that is positivism, which says that facts will ultimately lead to a scientific and rational knowledge which can be verified. Right? Now see, how did it emerge in public administration? Obviously, the base of the public administration comes from the positivist theorist. Okay, they talk about science. Fine, they talk about scientific methods in public administration. They talk about empirical orientation of public administration. Whether it is Wilson, whether it is Goodenough, whether it is L.D. White, whether you have all the principles phase that you talk about. Okay, Gulick, Nerwick, Simon, Weber, okay, Fayol, all of them. Right? So somewhere they talk about this idea, and they were influenced by this idea. Even your later behavioralists, okay, they were also influenced by this. They were big time positivists. They were empiricists in nature. Fine. So positivism, okay, tries to understand any phenomena of the society in terms of facts. Fine. Facts are what? Which can be visualized by sensory perceptions and quantified. Fine. Or we can find out the cause and effect of that relationship. I have done a video on that epistemology and etymology and the science and social science and natural sciences for public administration students, or in general for many students who can just go through it. So kindly watch that also. Right. So this is what the idea of positivism. So it got influenced. Obviously, public administration, we wanted to become a science. We wanted to eliminate all the social, cultural, emotional, political and all those aspects from the study of public administration which might lend it a non-scientific character. Right? So did it solve the identity crisis? No, it is obviously the logic that public administration wanted to emerge itself as more of an action part of the government. Right? It was more concerned with doing things. So obviously the public administration was considered more dynamic aspect, the more action aspect, the more procedural aspect. Right? In fact, it was considered to be more of an instrument. Right? Now this idea obviously influenced theorists or scholars to understand public administration more in terms of certain techniques and procedures, okay, which can be studied, and a system can be designed around these techniques and procedures, and then it can be used to do certain things. Now, what happened in this process? We dissociated the study of public administration, its tools and techniques. Tools and techniques became the specific focus, okay, structure, okay, procedures, they became the specific focus, but we dissociated public administration from its larger ecology, that is the politics, the society, the culture, and so many other things. I'll give you a very simple example. So when you take of Indian administration, can you think of Indian administration without knowing the British administration or the Mughal administration, or even prior to that the traditional, the historical administration that existed in this country? Right? Even if there were wars, even if there were revolutions, it does not mean, okay, the history will impact the future through the present. So present becomes the link for the future, past and the future. So you cannot think of what is existing today and what will be what is going to be existing tomorrow unless you link all this, this entire cause and effect relationship. But delinking public administration from political system, that was the idea on which the science was based. Okay, as thinking of public administration only as facts, okay, only as things that we can quantify, that we can see, okay, tools, techniques, and we know that these will be the consequence of these techniques and procedures. So technically they were making the PubEd predictable, understanding every aspect, the problems and issues in public administration and providing the solution for them. Right. Now this was the idea. This created a lot of problems. Now the usual problems are that positivism was questioned later. Fine. It made the entire study of public administration mechanical. It dissociated public administration from its human aspect. It dissociated public administration from, you can say, the study of social, emotional, cultural aspects. Right. So one of the videos I have talked about that how a policy implementing in the tribal area in the New Delhi would change the same policy, right? But the process will change. Right? The mechanism would change. Right? In fact, you can say the entire behavior of people who are implementing this policy and on whom it is being implemented has to be studied before that policy actually becomes a reality. Right? So obviously the idea of positivism was criticized later. It could not create the kind of consequence it wanted because public administration, okay, is a larger field of study of society, citizen, state, and economic system, politics or relationship. It is intertwined. It is not isolated. Crystal ball of knowledge, okay, separated from all this. So later PubEd, it was essential for PubEd to be multidisciplinary. It was essential for public administration to borrow knowledge from multiple disciplines. It was essential for public administration to understand what is the nature of public interest, what is the nature of welfare, what are the problems of society, what is social justice, okay, how to serve the people, how to resolve the problems, how to understand the day-to-day nature of problems that are emerging. We cannot always have a cut and dried method for administering things. Now all this obviously, okay, mobilized a huge mass of people, theorists, scholars, practitioners, fine, who questioned the basis of positivism, who questioned the basis of knowledge in public administration based on the scientific and factual study. Are you understanding this logic? So you can come up that yes, positivism provides the base, it gives us a concrete knowledge, it helps us make the phenomena predictable, understand the problems, provide ready-made solutions to certain problems based on imagining things, how they will unfold. But then society is dynamic. Okay. Culture has huge influence. Human beings are emotional beings. How they react, how they will behave, how they are going to, respond to a particular situation. We cannot calculate all of them, put up a graph, create a table or Excel sheet and then link it. We cannot do that. So ultimately public administration has to solve human problems. It has to solve social problems. It has to solve certain problems which are spontaneous in nature, and most of them are spontaneous in nature. Right? COVID is the best example. The government puts a lockdown. The people are scared of their lives for some time. The government lifts the lockdown. Still the problem persists. Still the fear of life is there. But you see the behavior of people. So now the government felt that once you light the deepak, once you what you could say, blow that ghanta or the thali, whatever you do, fine, when you bang the thali and the spoons, once you do that, okay, people will be what? Behaviorally reinforced with certain kinds of attitudes, right, or practices. But this does not happen. After 75 days also, okay, people now come back to the same point where they started off, right? So you cannot design a policy, you cannot take a decision imagining that people are going to work or act in a particular predefined manner. So this has been a big drawback in public administration, that it dissociated the public administration study from the larger sphere of human civilization, from the humanity, from the humanitarian aspects, okay, from the human behavior and emotions and psychology. But later on, yes, the later behaviorist, whether you talk about Maslow, whether you talk about the leadership theories, whether you talk about the contingency models, whether you talk about Fowler, Bernard, later Peter Senge, so many scholars later who realized, Peter Drucker, who realized that yes, without the understanding of human nature and behavior, there cannot be study of administration, whether internal or external, right? So this is how you can put it up. So positivism was contested by neo-positivists, positivism was contested by later behavioralists, post-behavioralists, positivism was contested by the postmodern theorist, the gender theorist, people who bring the gender perspective, the subaltern perspective, right? Positivism also believed that the world is black and white. Okay, there is West and non-West, and West is the dominant knowledge. West is the knowledge based on facts. Non-West is the knowledge based on culture and values, but it is not true. Yoga is today considered to be one of the best ways of lifestyle management, whether in West or East, right? The herbal impacts of the curcumin, fine, or the turmeric, for example, or the neem, fine, or whatever you see today, the traditional medicine systems which are becoming more dominant. The allopathy is being criticized. Okay, so the Western rubric of the Western entire the structure, the organization, and the paraphernalia which was created, that Western is becoming rudimentary today. So positivism, okay, probably was a way of defining science in a particular manner, whereas the science must be based on fact. So an idea comes that positivism was itself based on certain prejudices, the Western prejudices, right? So probably it has done more harm. We could not develop a unique study of developing countries. We could not incorporate the diversity that exists in the society. We could not incorporate the diverse challenges which administration may face in different society situations or societies, politics and cultures. Right? We actually dissociated this entire knowledge from the study of public administration. So it has done more harm, right? But yes, as a starting point, it was good. Any subject would try to be predictable. Any subject would try to be more factual. Any subject would try to have its disciplinary identity, right, in terms of its comparison and relationship with the natural sciences. Every discipline would try to have, more scientific and rational logic for certain things and explaining them. So positivism was actually the initiator of all these ideas. So nothing wrong with that. What we need is the positivism along with the humanitarian aspect, along with the behavioral aspect, along with the more social and cultural aspect. Fine. So we can just put the answer this way, right?